I want to talk a little bit today about one of these very invasive investigative techniques that is happening today and that we don't know enough about, but which is very dangerous. And that is government hacking. And so when I say government hacking, what I mean is law enforcement primarily, but also intelligence agencies basically breaking into your phone, your laptop, your computer, and collecting information about you from there. And we know that a lot of nations do this. From this amazing work by the University of Toronto's Citizen Lab, we know that Mexico does it, Ethiopia does it, Egypt does it, all the best governments are doing it. And they're targeting human rights activists and journalists and minority communities in order to get information. Our government does it too. We call it alternately things like, with these euphemistic names, like lawful hacking, as if it's always lawful, when isn't that the question? Is it lawful or not? They also call it something like extraordinary access, as if it's really extraordinary, like it's so wonderful. Or it's extraordinary as in it's out of the ordinary, like they're not doing it all the time. But I think the British at least have an honest name for it, which is equipment interference, which is actually what it is. So thank you to the Brits for that. But I call it government hacking. And what it does is basically, our government we don't have any statutes that actually enable or say it's okay to do this. What law enforcement, particularly the FBI, has been doing is they've been just getting your basic search warrant and then saying, well, that's enough. Once we get a search warrant, we can do whatever we want, even if it's this sort of novel and different kind of investigative technique. And the problem with that is that, I talked about the warrant and how important it is, but it really is sort of inadequate for certain kinds of problems. And government hacking is different from your average run-of-the-mill searches that often happen with a warrant in 5 particular ways. First of all, the amount and quality of data that's available. There is more and more sensitive information on my laptop than in 50 or 100 phone calls that I might make. The invasiveness of the practice. So government hacking can be used not just to access data that's stored in my laptop, but to do things like turn on the camera on my laptop or turn on the microphone on my smart TV and listen to the stuff that I say. Basically converting these consumer electronics that we have into these ubiquitous in-home surveillance devices, which is super useful if you want to find out what everybody's doing. By the very nature of collecting information in this way, the access to the computer can change data that's on the computer. How can somebody who's charged following one of these kinds of searches know that the information that's being used against them has integrity, that it is in fact what the information is and not something that was either intentionally or mistakenly altered by the search procedure? And defense attorneys aren't able to question this because the government says that the techniques are classified, or they basically rent the techniques from these companies that sell surveillance software or surveillance services to governments, and they claim it's a trade secret. So you can't really inquire about it or investigate it. Then there are the cybersecurity harms. Defense is hard. We all know about the cyber insecurity incidents, whether it's you losing your credit card from Target or TJ Maxx, it's the denial of service attacks that take down websites or banks. It's people getting phished or and having their passwords stolen, or we all know about these problems. And that's because defense is hard. The attacker can attack 1,000,000 times and only has to win once. The defender has to be there and win every single time. But with government hacking, instead of making sure that the government is incentivized to be on the defensive and to help secure our networks, now you have the government as an incentivized attacker who's interested in maintaining security vulnerabilities so that it can do surveillance and get into people's computers. And it's a well-funded attacker. Where does that put the kind of collective? The government is supposed to protect us from these attackers, but now the government is an attacker itself, and so are other governments. So you have this problem where, for example, the government might lose the exploits. And when you lose control of the exploits, that means somebody else can use it. So this is exactly what happened with the recent WannaCry attacks, if people heard about that. It shut down hospitals and caused like $1 billion worth of damage around the world. That WannaCry attack was based on an NSA exploit that had been stolen. What about the problem of whether companies are informed about vulnerabilities in their products so that they can fix it? The government now has an incentive, instead of informing companies, you should fix this problem, to keep the problem secret and keep the pathway open so that the attack can happen and the surveillance can take place. Okay, so it just causes these cybersecurity harms. And then finally, you have the problem of public trust. In order to convince people to download malware, we've seen the government pretend to be an AP reporter. We've seen the FBI host a child pornography service for 2 weeks. We've seen the FBI do spear phishing attacks. We've seen the FBI ask companies to subvert the security on their products and put back doors in or write malicious software updates so that instead of being secure, your devices become insecure. How can people trust software updates and the companies that we do business with? How can people trust the government when there's this fraud going on in order to convince people to install malware on their machines?